So welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to be facilitating the meeting today. Representative Stonier is in some committee meetings. The legislature is already starting to be in full swing. And so she's asked me to facilitate on her behalf today. So we'll just get started with a update on Harlow because I was not going to do it past a year. And guess what? Inquiring minds wanted to know how sweet this little boy is. And he is 99th percentile for his age. So he is very, very tall and super active and the funnest. I never thought being a grandparent was going to be this fun. It's the best. It really is the best. All of you out there that are a grandparent, you get it. You get it. So anyway, 15 months old, walking and talking, and it's just such a joy knowing that the work that we're doing every day is going to be impacting him and his colleagues or his classmates. So let's just jump right in. For those of you who have not seen it in our newsletter, where we've been blasting this all over the place, we were the recipients proudly of the 2024 Innovation in Financial Education Award through the National Endowment for Financial Education. We took the team to Denver to receive this award, and it was just really such the one of the most greatest prides that I've had, greatest pride that I've had, and really understanding that when we're with that group of people, it really shows us this unique approach that FEPP has had, and it started well before. So I share this award with the entire partnership and particularly our team, who's just worked really, really hard to make me look good every day. Then we also were in attendance at the Bank On Forum in, can you see that enough or do I need to make it a little bit bigger? Bank On Forum in Vancouver, and Milady and I gave a presentation as sorry, letting people in. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. It was Pathways for Youth Financial Literacy and Empowering Schools and Communities. So we were really able to dig in and give this presentation on just this unique approach we have and making sure that we're prioritizing our vulnerable youth. And Ryan did a great job. Ryan's here facilitating this because at the last minute our facilitator was sick, and so Ryan stepped in and did a great job of facilitating. And to Ryan's credit, look at our scores. We did great in our evaluations. So just really proud of the work that we've been doing, and it's getting noticed. So I'm just giving you the wrap up for our year one of our financial education grant. 26 districts applied. We finally got final totals in for the grant invoices. So the amounts that we approved were ranging, as you can see, from almost $2,000 to a little over $200,000. We did see districts step back from this opportunity as they were waiting to see how the graduation requirements legislation went forward, because they really wanted to make sure that they didn't get some deep into changing systems without knowing what the future was going to look like for them. So we did see a little bit of step back from them. But that's okay. We continued working with them as the second year went forward. And as you can see for the grant two update, we have only launched this the end of July because of some of the system issues with the new platform. So Lance, I got to give Lance a lot of credit because he has really worked hard. Lance and Linda have worked really hard to continue making this a priority. And so currently, since we only launched the end of July, we already have 18 districts with a total of almost $800,000. And mind you, we're right at about 2 million that we can give in financial education grants. And so to be able to give that 800,000 commitment, we're really hoping that we it's not just that they've applied for that, but that they will actually do the work that they've applied for, and that we'll actually be able to distribute those funds. So the other thing, Lance is starting to do a little bit more of a show on the road. He's going to be meeting as many smaller districts around Olympia that we can, just being mindful of travel, and see if we can't do in-person meetings that will really make an opportunity to that one-on-one hand holding. We're finding that the districts really appreciate that, and it has made a difference. Interesting enough, the districts that we're seeing apply for this are really small, the smaller districts. We're not really seeing the bigger ones taking advantage of this opportunity quite yet. And I think that we'll continue to solicit for this. So if you work with districts currently, please share this opportunity because we really like to distribute as much of these funds as we can. This grant application is closing the end of December. They have until the end of June to use the funds. A lot of the smaller districts are prioritizing that professional development piece is what they're using their money for. And they're also working closely with us and taking advantage of the resources that my team has put together. And we've got showcased on our website, and that's really making a big difference to support the districts. We've been presenting. We did since we last met in September. Lance has gone to the Washington Educators of Business, the WeBAM conference. They've done the Justice Impacted Financial Fair. As we just discussed, the National Endowment for Financial Education, where we presented. And we really had that National Endowment, the NEFI one, we really had the opportunity to meet with other states and understand the concerns that other states have. And through our conversations, I will tell you what we have seen over and over are these mandates that are not supported or funded. One of the recent conversations with NEFI, they've got 26 states that now have a graduation requirement, of which 22 do not have funding attached. And many of the states that we talk to, they're getting support through their Jumpstart coalitions and their state treasurer's office, and not always getting that state level guidance. So we've been building up for this opportunity and support for years and years and years. And so now that it's coming to fruition, where the work that we've done is paying off. And then Amy presented at the School Counselors Association. And again, the evaluation remarks we're getting are just showing how necessary this is to continue those partnerships, continue that collaboration with other internal programs at OSPI, because they've all just truly been so grateful for the way that we can leverage support for one another. We're also seeing that it makes a big difference that we're not only focusing on educator professional development, but some of those other adults that actually are in the lives of some of these students. That might be counselors, that might be some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Caseworkers, any of those kind of things where they also are getting that guidance from an adult. So we're training them into resources and what financial education could look like for some of these vulnerable students. So very, very proud of the work that we're doing. Also, Pathway, as you can see, you don't need me to read it. Bank on Forum, the WASIFI board meeting, which I sit on that board. Bobby's on the board. Pam's on the board. We're continuing to leverage those partnerships through WASIFI. And then Milady went up and gave a presentation with Lance at the Commission of African Americans Affairs. And again, another really strong partnership that's helping us make sure that we're getting materials and support into some of those demographics that really, really need the assistance. Let's see. Amy has been our resident webinar specialist. And I'm telling you, we really are finding that we're generating webinar series that are unique and different. We're seeing sometimes more availability of teachers than others, but largely we've hit that sweet spot of about an hour and a half after school where they don't need subs. They can come and get their professional development. We provide clock hours. And I will tell you that the evaluations that we get are highly supportive, that I feel like we're on the right path. And in fact, we have to slow ourselves down, Amy, don't we? That our ideas just keep coming, constantly coming. We're like, we just don't have time to put all these webinars together. So just really proud that we're able to continue supporting teachers in a way that's effective for them. Milady is working with the Migrant Education Office on this webinar series. I'm going to have Linda put some links to these in the chat. So there's still availability to register for some of the remaining webinar series for this one and the one we just talked about. So please feel free to share those opportunities. Also feel free to come yourself. You don't have to be a classroom teacher to take advantage of the content that we're putting out there. And we're really leveraging our partnerships across the state to get those guest presenters in there as well. And we're just really, really excited to keep these rolling. Um, we've made leaps and bounds in the last 3 months of our social media. I've got to definitely thank Department of Financial Institutions for loaning us out one of their staff, Jeremy Mock. And he has extensive background in social media. And he and Linda have been working on how we can build this plan, also track the analytics. We want to make sure that what we're doing is resonating with the audience. And also, Linda was really thoughtful about putting a survey out to our partnership, which our list serves about 14,000, to say what is it they want to see, where is it they want to see it. And we found that educators responded that they want to see the professional development opportunities. So we'll continue sharing ours on social media. We'll also continue sharing any of our partners. I know John with the Treasurer's Office does an adult series, and we try to make sure that we're putting those out there as well. And then lastly, just for the fun of it, thought it would be fun for you to see what kind of traffic that we're guiding to our website. And we'll keep giving you these fun little analytics to just show you that this is just since September 1st that we are driving business to our website. And we are seeing an uptick in some of the access to resources. And we will just continue to grow, or I guess what I want to say, not grow, but we constantly evaluating the website, working with the communications team to see what's working, what's not, and really try to thin it out on places that just isn't getting any activity because we want it to be easy to navigate. So we'll keep working hard on it. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me before we move on? Oh, okay. Just as a reminder for those of you who joined after after we started, Representative Stonier is in some legislative committee hearings today, or not hearings today, but committee meetings today, and so she's asked me to facilitate on her behalf. So I'm just trying to open the agenda so that Linda, have you captured roll call? Roll call.
Yes, I have.
All right, then I will just make sure I see what we're doing before we move on. Okay, next up will be the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. This would have been the September general membership meeting. So just as a reminder that FEPPP staff, we are not allowed to vote. So I count on you to make sure you've been able to read the meeting minutes and entertain any edits or questions. And if there are none, then I will be ready to make a motion.
Tracy, this is Mark. I move that we approve our minutes from our last meeting as drafted.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else? Second?
We'll just say goodbye to this one.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Yep, wonderful.
Thank you, Ryan. So, are there any abstentions? Or no, how about we say all those in favor, we can do a thumbs up, a wave, some kind of a little gesture to say you approve of the minutes. Anybody that disapproves, please make that known as well. Any abstentions? Thank you, Julie. Okay, then we'll say that the minutes have passed as written. Next, on to the committee reports. Let's start with Bobby.
Hi, everybody. Bobby DeGrucci. I'm excited to be here, co-chair of the Education Committee. Helen is out today, but I was lucky enough just able to speak and check in with her. What we talked about in our last Education Committee, and Pam, you weren't prepared to share, but I don't know if you want to give an update. If you're more than welcome to, if you'd like to talk about an update on where we're at with our financial standards, but we spoke about that as well.
Just a very quick update on the financial standards. They are going forward. OSPI has really embarked on this very ambitious road to update all of the standards in the state of Washington. We are in round 2, but round 1 isn't completely finished. Round 1, I believe, was English language arts, math, and maybe science. But then there are a group of other subjects that are part of round two. Because this process is continually evolving, there are requirements that are changed, and as they are learning about how best to move forward, we are as well. We are having a meeting with the fellows tomorrow to look at the standards and get additional feedback about power standards, which is, I think, going to be a very interesting discussion. We received initial feedback from the fellows, it was a year ago almost, on these. And since that time, sometimes attitudes change. So hopefully we will have some spirited feedback tomorrow, and we continue to move forward. We are using as the basis for our standards the recently updated Jumpstart Council for Economic Education national standards. So if you're curious about what they look like, you can always search Jumpstart National Standards and they will pop up. We are, of course, doing some tailoring to make them more Washington specific, but we're trying to be very limited on that, because even small word changes can be confusing to people who are trying to look at standards from a more national perspective, which are curriculum writers.
Thank you, Pam. Much appreciated. And those standards are available online, the Jumpstart CEE standards. And I recommend, I have them saved to my favorites. So if you guys want to check those out, they're very easy to find. Some other things that we spoke about is we already talked about our fall webinar series. And I just want to remind everybody, depending on whatever context that you're at, please make sure I'm just posting a link right here to one of the links in YouTube, but a lot of this stuff's online, and it is very valuable work to have if you can attend in person. There are things that you could use in your classroom or in professional learning. So please be sure to look at those resources that are available. And as we already discussed a little bit, there's lots of stuff going on. Both Amy and Milady are presenting lots of different presentations. Please sign up. Please take advantage of this great professional learning stuff that you can share with other teachers, to use yourself in your classroom, or use to use in developing your own professional training for staffs or colleagues. So, and another thing that we had was Adam Wright, who's the director of the Center for Economic Education at Western, shared a research project that he's working on, and he has some state funding for. And what that is looking at is the efficacy of financial literacy. Sorry, I just realized I'm probably speaking very quickly, so I want to slow down a little bit. One of the things, reflective practice is important, my friends. So one of the things that we're looking at is the difference between integration of financial literacy education here in Washington versus standalone courses, and what impact that has on students, which is a really good question because we don't have just one size fits all implementation of financial literacy. We don't, say one particular program versus another, but looking at what are the student outcomes and what does that look like as well. So that was wonderful to hear from Adam and share that. In research and readings, we talked about, I'm going to share with you, let me see your computer. We shared this earlier in the day. Oh boy, where did I save it? Here's a document that you are more than welcome to take a look at. And this is about, I'll upload it in the chat here in just a minute, but we looked at research from Maria Lusardi and Tim Kaiser. It's a large meta-analysis of the current state of financial education, outcomes, and positive impacts. It's a fun read. You can take a look at the abstract and the findings if you would like, but it helps to give you a better understanding of the state of financial literacy education currently in the United States. And we look forward to seeing you all again in the next Education Committee.
Any questions? Comments? Thank you, Bobby, for doing the report. I really appreciate it. Lynn is not here, so we'll just give a quick update. I don't think she's checked in yet. Nope. On behalf of the communications committee, as I said, the highest priority for that committee is getting the social media up and running and trying to understand how that messaging can really expand FEPPP and our presence. So we're working hard on that. The other thing that they're doing is continuing to coordinate together for conferences and other opportunities when, like, Jackie's here. Jackie always represents FEPP as well as the Washington 529 when she's out. DFI often represents us as well. And we just all kind of have that great opportunity to partner in those conferences. And we're just a very cohesive group. Mark, would you like to give the development committee report on behalf of Eric?
Yeah, happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. Mark Minichello, co-chair of our development committee. Eric Christensen wasn't available to join us today. Our budgets were included in the materials. Our last meeting was last week. We approved our minutes from our last two meetings. We're on track for our budget. We have some small overages. We're also working to add some more or move some of our unobligated funds to cover the Artemis contract. I'm not sure if you've heard the state is going to be in a need of money. They're asking all of our agencies to look at cost savings. And while we haven't specifically been asked, we are starting to work on that as well. Have identified some areas, mostly around travel and goods, that we might be able to scale back on if necessary. Happy to answer any questions.
Nope. No
Okay,
questions.
thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Just moving right along. And Barbara couldn't be here this afternoon, but at the executive committee meeting early on, I'm going to give you her report, which was just mainly sharing OSPI's legislative reports and funding, asking, I think their funding asks. So I'll put those in the chat. So that was a brief report as well. Lots in the chat today. We'll try to add those also in the minutes for next month or for the next meeting. So I am then going to just move to the old business, which is the chair report with Representative Stonier being gone. I'll just give you a brief update. Is Jesse on? So I think if not overstepping, if Jesse's on, he could certainly report about the legislation. I don't see him. So anyway, the state treasurer is looking forward to putting legislation forward for the graduation requirement. Again, they've assembled a they have assembled a coalition of financial education advocates to have that discussion with what that might look like going forward and how we can support those efforts, looking for supporting districts, educators. We're always going to continue advocating for K-12 along with the professional development opportunities. So keep an eye on that. We'll keep you posted throughout the next few months of the session. And then the small education boards are continuing their efforts to get independence and administratively separate from OSPI. When all of us were created, there wasn't something called small agency support. So our unique needs just that they just kind of have the need for separation and independence just because the bigger agency has just a lot it's just different. I don't know how to explain it. It's been a long day. So if you have any questions about that, you'll just see some legislation going forward and you let me know if you have questions. So with that said,
Hey, Tracy.
yes.
It's Anna from OST. I'm not quite sure why Jesse popped off, but if anyone did have questions on our agency request legislation, feel free to just send me a DM, and I'll be happy to follow up with you. And we're definitely excited to continue promoting financial education, not only in the legislature, but as the treasurer has been traveling, the state and the country, we talk about it in every community and every corner of the state that we've been to, and it's been a big priority for our office. So just love continuing to partner with FEPP and all y'all as we continue to work towards financial education for not only all of our students, but all of our residents. So happy to be a partner.
Thank you so much, Anna. I greatly appreciate that. And that is an important part to know. Some of our partnerships are really helping us seamlessly work on the K-12 side and work with partners like the Treasurer's Office, who is a great priority for adult education. And we just work very well making sure that we're meeting the needs of communities. So thank you for adding that. I see Jesse popping on. I wonder if I could take a minute. Jesse, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I was going to just let you talk about any of the legislation that you want to. I did a little bit of a sloppy job trying to speak on your behalf, but be more than welcome to give a little bit of an update.
Absolutely. Can folks hear me? Sorry, I
Yeah,
got kicked off for a second.
no
Okay.
problem. Thank you.
So yes, our financial education legislation is underway. We are hoping to file at the beginning of January. If just for as a reminder, our bill is similar to last year's bill. What we are kind of doing differently is because of the School Board of Education's process of Future Ready or profile of a graduate that they're undergoing over the next 2 years. We kind of defer to them on a lot of our recommendations for the graduation requirement itself. It still is consistent with a credit to or half credit, I should say, for a prerequisite for graduation. But there could be alternatives with regards to math. There could be alternatives after school, and so there's different components that we're leaving up to local school boards to have more flexibility. And we're also kind of trying to align ourselves with that process that the Board of Education is already doing. There's also an on-ramp. So last year's bill started financial education for 2027, which means the class of 2031 would be the starting class. That's being pushed out in our policy for 2029, which means the class of 33. It's hard to keep up with the years. Would be the first graduating class for the requirement. So we're trying to align ourselves and also give more of an on-ramp for those school districts to have this in place and train and develop teachers and that sort of thing. And so we are in the process of working to finalize the bill for January. We do have a prime sponsor in the Senate, Senator Valdez, who's agreed to work on the bill. The House is still kind of up in the air as we're having discussions with different legislators on that front. We also have an external coalition being led by Joe Adamak, who's on the call. So thanks, Joe, from the Northwest Credit Union Association, as well as Megan Manigan. Not sure if she's on the call, but Megan from the Washington Bankers Association. So if folks are interested in being part of that coalition to meet biweekly and work on strategy for the bill beginning in January, please let me know. And I will get your information over to Joe and Megan to send out the invite. But we're really excited about the bill. I know the Treasurer's Office, this is one of our, if not the top bill for our office and top priority. Because of hearing across the state of Washington how important this legislation is, we're going to be putting a lot of time and effort into it. So any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat and we can go from there.
Any questions for Jesse? Thank you, Jesse. Sorry to put you on the spot right when you jumped back in. Thank you. So right now that concludes our the FEPPP operational business, and now we get to move on to new business. I've asked one of our fellows, Mary Ziegert, to be here today, who has just been really expanding financial education in the North Thurston Public Schools, and I will not even do it justice. I'm just going to turn it over to you, Mary. If you need to share screen, you certainly can, and just give us an update on what you've been working on.
Okay, everybody. Hello. I'm so glad to be here. Very honored that Tracy asked me to do this. I have to tell you, I'm very excited about a lot of the things that we're doing. What I'm going to share with you today is what my school in particular is doing. And we're hoping to spread this, and I can tell you it is spreading. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Give me a second. And let me see if I can share my screen. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to start by saying I'm an elementary school teacher, so of course I'm going to use PowerPoints and graphics. I'm sorry. It is part of who I am. But I started with breaking news. It starts in elementary school. Financial education is elementary education in our school. So I'm at Evergreen Forest Elementary in Lacey. It's a small school. We have been incorporating financial education across the school. We're doing it in classrooms across grade levels. We're doing support classes such as lap and sped, our specialist class, PE especially, and then in after school clubs and programs, which have really taken off in the last 2 years. And this year by far is the biggest year. So what I want to tell you about classroom economies, this year our fifth grade classes decided to just do a classroom economy across the grade level. And I've been lucky enough to step in and see this in action. It has really improved student relationships. It has improved behavior, a lot more accountability. These are a lot of behavior things that we're seeing, social interactions. But what I particularly saw in the fifth grade classrooms were all students had to apply for jobs. They had to have some way to make their expenses. They rent desks, borrow supplies, etc., bathroom fines. They get to spend their money on activities that don't take away from the classroom, but actually enhance their learning, such as special privileges, maybe working on a computer for a fun Friday or something. The first thing that really impressed me when I walked in was finding out that they actually have a lockbox, which is a cash box, and the teacher wears the key, and they have a banker, and that student goes in and unlocks the box on payday, and they actually make change and cash checks. There's a lot of those types of things. Every student has access to a spreadsheet, a Google Doc spreadsheet, where they can track their expenses and see their fines. Any fines given by the police officer in the classroom has to be approved by the teacher. And those fines are deducted from their paycheck right away. And by looking at the spreadsheet, I could tell that there were some students that had net pay due zero. And this is becoming something the students are working towards, and the parents are backing it, which is really exciting for us. These are actual photos of like the lockbox. I know it's a horrible graphics. Going back, let me go back one page, a second here. Can't do it. Won't let me. Oh, well. But anyways, they're horrible graphics because I wasn't able to get a clear picture. But there are actually registers that the students have to keep, and they have a bank book that they have to keep. And this is part of their grade as well as part of their daily process. And it's been easier for substitutes. I've talked to some that have been in the fifth grade classrooms to keep it going because the students have made this their way of acting for the last 3 months. Examples in fourth grade classrooms, we use a lot of STEM activities where students have to create something and then market it, but they have to look at supply and demand, and they have to look at what is a need versus what is a want. So we're doing a lot of that type of thing. All three fourth grade classes are doing the So Sweet candy jar to earn up points, and those points are turned into dollars, and dollars are used to buy different types of reward systems. So also starting this year, all three fourth grade classes are doing Money Savvy. This is in my classroom. I just started this yesterday, actually. But Money Savvy, for those of you that might not be familiar, is students learning about 4 parts of saving, which is short-term savings, long-term savings, investing, and donating. So they learn those 4 parts. And after the students have done several lessons, they earn a piggy bank, and it has 4 different legs that open to different compartments. And once the students have gone home and interviewed an adult about their job and about what it's like to have to get a paycheck, where things are taken out of, and what kind of things are important for savings, then the students are allowed to keep the banks, but they have to turn in their little interview at the end of the book. But we do use the same financial terms when we talk about SEL, social emotional learning. We talk to the students about making choices. And when you give up one choice for another, that means it's an opportunity cost. We talk about peer pressure and how does the media pressure us into buying things that we might not need, so that we relate wherever we can form a bridge, we do. So we set goals. We talk about the importance of making a plan, whether it's problem solving or planning for a goal. We do a lot of important work with training the students on how to reflect, to go back and look at their actions, whether it's behavior or it's something financial, and how to evaluate what do they need to do moving forward. So we're trying to bridge that as much as possible. And of course, we teach money when we teach decimals and fractions as normal. But that's not the only place we have it. We have it everywhere else in our classroom. Examples of how it's practiced in our specialists and lab and SPED classes, our specialist teachers use a point scale of 1 to 4, just like on the report card. And the students are paid with paper money. So they actually have to have the physical bills in their hand when they come back to class. And based on that, that money is used towards their point system in the classroom to earn those rewards. It's a new thing that they're doing this year with our specialists. So I was really excited to see it. In LAP and SPED, what we're seeing are students are coming back with new supplies. It used to be pieces of candy or little toys, trinkets. Every once in a while, they'll still have that. But they're coming back with supplies once a week when they go to their class store. And they are earning rewards for participation, for effort. It's never payment for a grade. It's always for the effort that they're putting in. Are they working diligently? Are they focused? Those are the things that they're rewarding, because these students are already traumatized by the I'm not able to do what other kids do type attitude. And we don't want to reinforce that, but we want to reinforce their effort. But the students are also fined. They get a fine if they do not apply themselves during class time. And after so many fines, they are being removed from the group that they're in to work with another smaller group, where they can maybe even have a one-on-one at that time. So there are a lot of things that are tied into this, and our teachers have been wonderful about this. What I'd like to mention about this is the fact that this was never a school-wide discussion. And that's why I was so excited when Tracy said, well, this is spreading. It is spreading. It is spreading. And it wasn't until I started asking other people, tell me more about this, that I started finding out that these other teachers are starting to incorporate this stuff, which I thought was really cool. 3 years ago, a fellow teacher and I formed what we call the Compassion Club after school. And the whole point was to lift up our community and see what we could do to affect the quality of life. We started off with something simple like everybody going out with tongs and rubber gloves and picking up trash out of the parking lots and playgrounds and stuff like that. But the first year and the second year we did a clothing drive. The students decided that's what they wanted to do, was a clothing drive. And I chose the Union Gospel Mission of Olympia because I felt that that was a place that doesn't get as much support as our local food banks and type things. So I chose the place that they would donate to, but they decided what it would be that they would do. And so they did up their whole program. They made the plan. They put up posters. They went around and collected items. They folded them. They organized them, put them together. And so we did that for 2 years, 2 school years. And then this year, we have an influx of new students. Most of the students have moved on to middle school. And they decided they wanted to do something with the local food bank because they felt that even though the food bank gets support, there's not enough. Okay. So, which I thought was really a unique idea because I don't know where that thought came from, but they started talking about it. And one person said it, the other person chimed in and said, "You're right. They need more soup. They need things that are going to warm them up." So this year we did a soup drive for our local food bank, and it was pretty successful. The big thing is, oh, I have a typo in there. Oh, I'm sorry. The big thing is student voice. We let our students call the shots on this. We really felt our first meeting was, okay, this is what does compassion mean? And they took it from there. So we let the students lead the meetings. We're really just facilitators. Moving forward, the students are still looking for other ways to economically help our community, even though it does not mean collecting food or clothing. It might be something as in, let's reduce waste. Let's do some recycling. Let's do some collections, that type of thing. So I was really proud of this group because, like I said, it's our third year. This one is my baby. After school, I started this year a group. I call it BLAST. We meet once to twice a month. BLAST stands for Basic Learning Around Saving Thoughtfully. And I thought it was kind of a cool acronym. But anyways, our fourth and fifth graders they come and they meet with me. The first meeting we had, we did a career snowball thing. And the students learned a lot about each other and about the importance every type of job plays in our community, not just careers, no longer just doctors, lawyers. We were talking a lot about hostesses and waitresses and people who run printing offices. And I mean, it was just really good conversation to have. And then the second meeting we met, we actually talked about budgets because that's what the students wanted to know. What is a budget? They keep hearing their parents talking about it around the holidays. So we talked about budgets and we got into this really deep conversation about choices with money that they see people making. And they talk about one has a mom that just does not understand what a budget is. And dad is very strict on the budget. So whenever dad's not home, mom takes them shopping because they know that that's the time to get what they need. But we had a lot of them talk about how money is wasted, which turned into a discussion about some people spend it on alcohol and drugs or gambling. And I'm just like, whoa, these are 9 and 10-year-olds. But yes, they were definitely spending time on that. I'm still reaching out to Thurston County Solid Waste to see if they're still willing to do a smart shopping lesson with my kids. On the schedule right now, we have 2 guest lessons about budgeting coming from Sound Credit Union. They'll be coming in. And of course, FEPPP, Tracy's agreed to come in 1 to 2 lessons between January and February. But the thing about this club is I have the 100% backing of my administrator, which is something that's different. In the past, administrators have been, okay, finances, yeah, we got to get that in there. Yes, it's okay. But this time it's solid. I had a meeting with the administrator at her request, and she said, let's talk about where you want to go with this. And she came up with the idea of building an outdoor classroom for our school. And we're talking about doing it next year and having the club actually plan it, do the shopping to see what the prices are, trying to manage a budget, create a budget and manage it, and work towards getting that classroom done. So I was very excited about that. So the whole point behind this for me was that Evergreen Forest is the school I work at, and we're trying to set an example for other schools in our district. We want to get the word out that teaching financial education isn't just a trendy new thing, another thing the district is trying, but it's actually important and critical to our students' development. And with that note, I have to tell you, I was also asked to do a PD in January for our Ignite Academy, which is our online schooling, homeschool online. They want me to do a PD on financial education and social studies with their teachers. So I know that this is going out there. It's just a lot of support that we're getting. And I can't tell you enough how different it is this year versus 3 years ago. I mean, it's just made a difference. So thank you for listening. And sorry about the typos.
No problem. Mary, I just have to say, I've been in your classroom multiple times. I think some of our other team has been in there, and Mary is such an amazing teacher, and she can deliver this content in a way that these students are just engaged. They're fully engaged. One of them was almost 2 hours engaged in the lesson last time we were there, and they absolutely want to know more. And they get together, and the conversations that they have, even when I come in every year and read the book for the reading days, it's just amazing the way that you allow those students to just think and share and talk together, and it's just wonderful. Anybody have any questions for Mary? Oh, Pam, please.
First of all, Mary, I was there that first night when you got all the parents together and did a parent workshop, and I saw the reaction. It's probably not the same administrator, but Mary ran a parent night and cooperation and partnership with the Council for Econ Ed. And it seemed like thousands of parents showed up, and I know there weren't that many, but everyone was shocked by how many people came. But I thought particularly the principal was surprised that there was so much there. So Mary is igniting these little fires of interest everywhere. But thanks, I have to ask Mary, does each of your fourth grade classrooms have a different currency, or are you all sharing a common currency?
They have a common currency. Although they do have one of the classes, they have a debit card. That's the only difference. They have a debit card that they're allowed to use, but not many of the students use it because they said their parents taught them cash only. And I think if I am correct, it's mostly one edge of the population in that class. And those are the students that are coming in from migrant families.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There was a school up here in Bellingham where they had the fifth graders doing it, but there were only 2 fifth grade classrooms and they each had their own currency.
Wow.
And the little kids figured out an exchange rate between the 2 currencies, all on their own. No one even mentioned it. They just did it. And but it created some havoc. And it's so nice to see that y'all avoided all of that with the common currency.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mary, you can stop sharing screen if you'd like. And then in the meantime, Bobby, you've got your hand up.
Oh, I just want to say, Pam and Mary, I don't think it's ever too early to teach kids about arbitrage. But Mary, I wanted to say thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I also want to say, and you said this, and those of us who are classroom teachers understand this as well. The level of support we get is always going to be varied, right? And that was kind of underlying what you said there. So thank you so much for sticking with that. And thank you to your administrator as well for the support of the program that you're doing. And again, super proud to be your colleague and to be a fellow with you, and couldn't be prouder of your work. Looking forward to hearing more about it. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I hope you're taking a minute, Mary, to see all the wonderful comments in the chat. Anybody else have any last comments or questions for Mary before we move on? Mary, are you still looking? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Marie.
Gotta unmute myself. Mary, this is amazing. I commented on DECA in the elementary level. I'm close to University Place School District, and our Viking alumni learned about budget and marketing at the high school level. And so I think it's outstanding that you are creating DECA type curriculum in your grade level. I'm very, very impressed. I want to talk to you a little bit more on another time. I think I'm about a half hour away from you, but is this also in the different grade levels at your school? Or are you starting out in the 4th and 5th grade level to start?
We're starting with 4th and 5th, but we're looking at bringing it down even farther. There's smaller elements that are happening in the classrooms, the lower primary classes, but that I could see easily happening within the next year and a half.
Super. And real quick, is the junior high or the high school doing anything like what you're doing? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not
All
sure.
right. Super. I'm gonna dive into that for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much. Mary, are you still looking for, I mean, I know I've got some of my team coming into the classroom for lessons. Are you still looking for other people that you would fill it in? If so, how would you like to communicate?
I am always open to ideas. So I would welcome anybody who wants to come in and help. I just email. Email is the best for me.
Why don't you pop that in the chat so people will have your email address and then they can connect with you later. I think your district needs to have you present to the whole district the success of this program. And Colleen, are you nodding your head because your kids are in that district? That's what I thought. That's awesome. So, okay, well, any other questions or last minute thoughts? And all of you, thank you for your comments in the chat. It's helpful. Then I think we have our last item. We're moving right along, and Matthew Barber is our Assistant Attorney General, and he is here to give us our annual presentation on our Open Public Meeting Act to make sure that we're in compliance. And he's been excellent about making sure that we know all the intricacies and ins and outs so that we are staying compliant and keeping the public fully aware of the work that we're doing. So, Matt, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it over to you and I'll mute myself and let you go.
All right, thanks, Tracy. And can I, oh, I see I can do some screen sharing here. All right. Well, we will have the favorite part of today's meeting, of course, is the OPMA training. Just as a disclaimer to start with, this is intended to provide a high-level overview of the OPMA, the Open Public Meetings Act. It's not legal advice or legal opinion. As we go along, please feel free to ask general questions. However, if you have more specific questions, that might require answers that constitute legal advice. In that case, I can follow up with you, or those questions can get routed through Tracy, and we can provide advice after the meeting has concluded. The PowerPoint deck that I'll be using today contains a lot of slides with text because it's intended to be an available resource for the board members. After the meeting, I'll provide a copy of the slide deck to Tracy so she can share it with the board members. I should also point out that the information used in preparing the slide deck came from publicly available resources and guidance materials. I'll be referring to those and including some references to them during the training. And I also want to point out that it's always good to have, even though it's not required to be annually, it's good that it's done annually because the OPMA can change over time. There can be statutory changes. There can be changes in court decisions interpreting and applying the OPMA that can affect how we understand how the law is applied and what an agency's obligations are. So having these done annually is helpful for keeping the board up to date on what its OPMA obligations are. And just in case anybody needed to know, the Open Public Meetings Act can be found in the Revised Code of Washington in Chapter 4230. There we go. Now, OPMA training is required. It's generally required within 90 days of a member of a governing body taking their oath of office or assuming their duties. And then refresher trainings are required no later than every 4 years. Trainings can be taken online, they can be done in person, they can be taken by other means. I've included a hyperlink here or a URL for the Attorney General's Office's Open Government Training page where you can find online videos with OPMA materials. And it's very important to keep abreast of what's going on with the OPMA. Because although there's less litigation in the context of the OPMA than under the State Public Records Act, ramifications can be significant. And I'll get into this a little bit more on the next slide, but there can be civil penalties that can be imposed. Action can be declared null and void. There can also be perception penalties for noncompliance. And also, we have to acknowledge that the OPMA is intended to promote transparency and visibility. It's a sunshine measure. So compliance with the OPMA promotes the policy that Washington has set of ensuring openness and transparency. And I do want to start off early on with discussing the penalties because they can be significant. Violations of the OPMA can have serious legal, political, and other consequences. So it's good to start out by highlighting what those are so we can understand why compliance is so important. You'll see here on the slide that we talk about the personal civil liability that can be applied. Each member of a governing body who attends a meeting held in violation of the OPMA, who knows the meeting is in violation and action is taken at that meeting, those members can be subject to a civil penalty of $500 for the first violation and $1,000 for any subsequent violations. This is not a criminal penalty, but there have been judicial decisions in the past that have held that OPMA violation could provide sufficient basis for a recall effort against an elected board member. There's also the possibility that if an OPMA violation is found, that the party bringing that complaint could be awarded costs, including attorney's fees. There's also the potential that party could seek an injunction to stop OPMA violations or prevent threatened violations of the OPMA. And then we also have to acknowledge, as I mentioned previously, there can be a perception penalty that can be applied. It could be negative media attention. It could be a feeling by members of the public that the agency is or entity is not being open and transparent in what it's doing, which can harm the agency's ability to carry out its mission or harm its ability to carry out its mission as effectively as it may want. But with that understanding, let's talk about the purpose of the OPMA. The OPMA was passed in 1971, requires meetings to be open to the public from start to finish, from the opening gavel to the closing gavel. as part of the declaration of purpose in the OPMA, they recognize that transparency in government action promotes public confidence in government. And I would encourage you to take a look at the purpose statute. That's RCW 42.30.010. Get a flavor for that language in the purpose section. The language about agencies being servants of the people, that the public has a right to know and to see what's happening by the entities of its government. That's taken very seriously in Washington. My apologies, I didn't realize that this had been an animated slide. But again, these bullet points just cover what we've already gone over. The Open Public Meeting Act, let's just go over the basics, who it applies to, what it requires. The OPMA applies to governing bodies of state and local agencies. The FEPP is a state agency. Agency is defined broadly. Any state board, commission, committee, department, or other state agency created by or pursuant to statute, other than courts of the legislature. Governing body is also defined broadly to mean a multi-member board, commission, committee, council, or other policy or rulemaking body of a public agency, or a committee thereof when acting on behalf of the governing body. And this could be conducting hearings, receiving public comment, taking testimony, things like that. Let's just briefly diverge to talk about what the OPMA does not apply to. It doesn't apply to, as we mentioned, the courts, legislature. It doesn't apply to agencies governed by a single individual. Also doesn't apply to your local homeowners association. Won't apply to matters that are governed by the State Administrative Procedure Act or collective bargaining agreements. Also doesn't apply to social gatherings. So it's permissible to travel, attend functions. If the FEPPP body decides to all show up at one night at a production at the Fifth Avenue Theater, or they go to a Storm game, and they're just talking about the game or thoughts about recent trades, that's fine. That's not applicable to the OPMA. So again, it's so long as the majority of the board doesn't take action. If after going to the show or after going to the game, the FEPP then goes to the local Dick's Drive-In for a shake and fries afterwards and suddenly decides to start talking about a contract or other business before the agency, then the OPMA would be implicated, because then the board is starting to take action that would be subject to the OPMA. When having a public meeting, minutes need to be recorded and need to be open to public inspection. There is no format specified for minutes in the law. And if a meeting has a remote attendance option, such as today's, the agency should be including relevant information like the URL link or call-in conference line numbers to the meeting minutes. If an executive session is held as part of a public meeting, minutes of the session are not required. However, the purpose of going into executive session does need to be recorded in the meeting minutes. And to touch back on the idea of public access and remote attendance, since the last significant update to the OPMA in 2022, which of course made changes to the OPMA that reflected experiences during the lockdown phase of the COVID pandemic, agencies are now being encouraged to provide recordings or online streaming options to promote access, to make agencies more available and transparent. Public comment time is now required as part of those 2022 changes. Also, public agencies cannot place conditions on a public attendance at meetings subject to the OPMA. Attendees can't be required to register their names or complete a questionnaire. That said, agencies subject to the OPMA may impose generally applicable conditions that are determined to be reasonably necessary to protect public health or safety or to protect against interruption of a meeting. They can also set reasonable rules of conduct for public meetings. With regards to public comment time, it is now required that public agencies, as part of the OPMA, must provide time for public comment at each meeting. Comment can be either done orally during the meeting, or it can be provided in writing. And I'll go into this a little bit more on a subsequent slide, but if an agency does decide to accept public comment in writing, they can set some time limits on when that submission of written comments needs to be provided so that those comments can be distributed to the board in advance of the meeting. Um, we've talked about what an agency is. What's a governing body? Again, this is defined fairly broadly. So it would be the multi-member governing body of a state or local agency. It can also apply to subcommittees of that governing body if the members of the subcommittee would form a quorum. It can also be a subcommittee of the governing body if that committee has been delegated final decision-making authority or authority to conduct hearings or take public comment or testimony. Essentially, if that subcommittee is acting on behalf of the governing body taking those actions. Next is what constitutes a meeting that's subject to the OPMA. A meeting for purposes of the OPMA is a meeting where a majority of the board, that a quorum, has gathered with the collective intent of transacting the governing body's business. That, in other words, taking action. And just in case there's any concern, a meeting can happen even if the event is not titled a meeting. This could include study sessions, retreats. It could also include phone trees and email correspondence between the majority of the members of the board. It does not, however, include the passive receipt of information. So if information is just sent out without comment, that's not a meeting. And we're going to go over this again in a couple of slides, but I do want to emphasize the concept of serial or hub meetings, which can happen over email or phone calls. Those can be subject to the OPMA, and that does present a risk. So it is important to be aware of who you're emailing and what's being discussed over email. When it comes to transacting official business for the OPMA, this is very broad. There can be some confusion between what is action and what is final action. Action is very broad. It includes final action, but it means deliberations, discussions, reviews, receiving public testimony. See the examples provided on this slide. Action also includes final actions. Final actions is more than just voting. It's a collective decision. It's when the governing body makes a collective position or a vote against or for a proposition. Reaching consensus can be final action. When a governing body is taking final action, it must do so in public, even if the deliberations occurred in a closed meeting, such as an executive session. If actions are taken if actions are taken during the meeting that is not open to members of the public, or at a meeting that otherwise fails to comply with the OPMA, those actions can be declared null and void. I had earlier mentioned the dangers of emails, texts, phone calls. We're going to get into phone calls on the next slide, but I do want to talk about emails because there is a risk when exchanging emails and, of course, now text messages among board members about board business that those emails can constitute a serial meeting. This can occur when a majority of the board members of a governing body engage in action over email or text messages. Action is, for the purpose of the OPMA, defined broadly and can include discussing business, reviewing proposals, things like that. So if an email is being sent around and there's being discussion about board business, that email then can become a meeting subject to the OPMA, especially if there's a quorum. However, I just want, again, as I previously mentioned, passive receipt of information, that doesn't constitute a meeting. Sharing information, sending documents, that's not going to trigger a serial meeting. And you can find more information on the AGO's website. We have an open government resource manual that's available that has more information about serial meetings and how that can happen. Perhaps one of the biggest pieces of advice for avoiding that risk is just not clicking that reply all button and being cautious when forwarding email messages. Phone calls, conversations that occur over social media platforms, those in-person conversations I mentioned at the drive-in restaurant after a sporting event or a theater production, those can become a meeting if a quorum of members are present and the discussion turns towards and involves board business. So it's very important to be careful if you have a quorum of members available present and the conversation starts to turn away from grandkids, business, to keep it on grandkids. Avoid having those board business conversations. I'd mentioned earlier hub discussions. That can occur when one person is contacting multiple people one at a time, where that one person is acting as the hub of the meeting. So beware of that as well. That can happen when phone conversations are happening. Person A reaches out to person B, then reaches out to person C, and it's keeping that meeting going. Because these meetings are not, whether they're serial or hub, are not occurring in public and they're not transparent, they're not available for public view, they will violate the OPMA. So do be aware if of that happening and just watch out for it. We're often asked if board members can travel together to board functions or events. The answer is yes. It's not a violation for a majority of the members of a governing body to get together on a van, pool, or a plane for the purpose of going to a meeting. Again, just like the example with the drive-in, as long as no action is taken, again, it's okay to talk about the kids, grandkids, the game, just not the board business. Doing that will trigger the OPMA. And remember too that the definition of action for purposes of the OPMA is very broad. So you'll want to avoid this. That's another reason for avoiding discussion of things that could be considered board business. Sorry about that. The OPMA recognizes three types of meetings: regular, special, and emergency. We're going to go into each type of meeting on the next couple of slides. Reason I point this out is that meeting notice and agenda requirements are going to vary depending on the type of meeting. Regular meetings are defined as the regular reoccurring meetings held in accordance with a periodic schedule declared by statute or rule. FEPPP has filed with the state register its annual meeting schedule. Those are its regular meetings. There can be special meetings. Those can be called at any time by the governing body's presiding officer or by a majority of its membership. These can occur with at least 24 hours notice, so much shorter amount of notice than a regular meeting, but they are limited to taking final action only on those matters that are identified in the meeting notice that's published. Emergency meetings can only be held when there is a need for the governing body to act quickly because of a natural disaster or other emergency. Unlike regular and special meetings, emergency meetings can be held off-site, but best practice is to try as much as possible provide at least 24 hours notice if you're going to be calling an emergency meeting. There we go. First off, the type of meeting you're most familiar with, that's going to be your regular meetings. These are the regularly reoccurring meetings of the governing body of the public agency. And notice is going to be the primary difference between a regular meeting and a special meeting. As I mentioned before, regular meetings, those dates have to be published in advance. Special meetings only require 24 hours notice. Boards and agencies typically adopt a schedule of the time and places of their meetings, and that's filed with the Code Reviser, usually on or before the start of the upcoming year. The meeting agenda needs to be posted on the agency's website 24 hours before the meeting. Now, we do often get questions about, can we change the date of a regular meeting? Yes. A regular meeting date can be changed. Just need to publish in the state register the new meeting date at least 20 days before the new meeting is set to occur. Agendas can also be modified. While the agenda has to be posted at least online at least 24 hours before the meeting, if something happens, a speaker can't make it, something pops up that requires governing body's attention, you can amend the agenda to include that additional information after initially posting the agenda 24 hours in advance. I had mentioned that one of the differences between regular meetings and special meetings is that in special meetings, the governing body is limited to considering topics that are on the meeting agenda. At a regular meeting, the body is not so limited. They can take action on and consider matters that are not necessarily on the agenda. I also want to just point out, just as a practical issue, there's a general consensus among the assistant AGs here that entities subject to the OPMA should not schedule their meetings to occur in locations that effectively exclude the public from being able to attend or observe. For example, this could be in terms of distance or cost. Also, entities that are subject to the OPMA should consult with their assistant AGs to see if there is any applicable statutory requirement that they hold a meeting in a certain location. There are some public entities, for example, city councils of second-class cities, who, if they're taking votes on certain matters, those votes and meetings need to take place within the city limits. There may also be questions, sometimes we get, smaller agencies may not have a website. If they share a website with another entity, they can post it on that shared website. Also, just want to point out, if an entity subject to the OPMA does not publish its agenda as required, that failure could result in a civil penalty. but it would not serve as a basis for obtaining attorney's fees or bringing actions that occur at that meeting, making them potentially subject to an injunction or mandamus action. Special meetings. As I've mentioned before, the most important thing to remember about special meetings is that final action taken at special meetings is limited to those items that are on the published agenda. So if calling a special meeting is going to be very important, to be very deliberate in listing the items that are going to be on that meeting's agenda. Written notice of a special meeting needs to be delivered to each member of the governing body and any media entity that has requested notice. This has to be at least 24 hours notice, unless the members of the governing body have waived that requirement. The notice also needs to be published to the entity's website, assuming they have one. They also need to provide notice, post notice at their physical location, at least 24 hours in advance. This could be the main entrance, just taping something to the door or to a bulletin board that's outside. If physical attendance is going to be limited at a special meeting because of a declared emergency, the agency isn't required to post the notice on its website if it doesn't employ full-time employees or employees whose job description involves updating the website. It can just conduct the meeting as a remote meeting if the emergency is declared and notice can't be posted with reasonable safety. Emergency meetings, these are fairly limited. These are generally going to occur if, by reason of fire, flood, some other form of natural disaster, there's a need for expedited action. The presiding officer can provide for a different meeting site. The body can meet remotely, and notice requirements that are generally applicable are going to be suspended during the emergency. If, however, notice is provided of an emergency meeting, the notice needs to include instructions on how members of the public can listen live or access video and audio of the meeting. Notice, however, is not required for emergency meetings when either time requirements or would make notice impractical or increase the likelihood of injury or damage. Notice also isn't required to be posted or displayed when it can't be done with reasonable safety. If after an emergency has been declared by the federal government or state or local government or agency, if the public agency determines it can't hold an in-person meeting with reasonable safety because of that emergency, it can the agency can then hold a remote meeting without a physical location. It can limit attendance if needed. But if doing the meeting electronically, the electronic means used for the remote meeting must allow for real-time verbal communication. In other words, the public needs to be able to listen in to what's happening during the meeting. The public agency cannot use an option that imposes costs for participation. Also, the governing body cannot take action outside of an executive session at a remote meeting or meeting where physical attendance is limited if they haven't provided an option to listen to the proceedings, except of course for the executive session. And during an emergency meeting, if there's an emergency situation in effect, the governing body does not need to provide an opportunity for public comment. Now, that was a lot of boring information, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any that come up. And again, if there are more detailed questions that might require some legal advice, I'm happy to run those through Tracy and get those answered for you.
Thank you, Matt. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I know it's a lot of information, and I appreciate that they did update that after COVID because you and I had many conversations about what our limitations were during that time when we were all virtual. So, and just in staying in compliance, we've also added an in-person meeting location to all of our meetings for our subcommittee meetings as well as our general membership meeting. So if anybody should like to come in, we do have a meeting reserved, or we will have for every one of our subcommittee meetings, but we'll also be continuing to do them virtually to do our part, saving on gas and time. So any other questions, comments? Thank you, Matt, so much.
Of course.
I was just going to go back to get back to our agenda. I think we're at public comment. So is there anybody that's present that would like to give any public comment for the group? I didn't hear any ahead of time.
I have a question.
Yeah,
actually, I'm asking for help.
Okay.
This weekend on my phone, my Google on my phone, an article from Forbes was dated, I believe, December 6th, but in that area on financial education, where Forbes had an editorial, I believe, that said, strangely enough, teacher education is crucial to financial education. If any of you can find that article, would you please share it with me or with any of us? Because I think it's a really nice acknowledgement on the part of a major publication that teacher training, without teacher training, we have a great deal of difficulty in implementing this. But I've looked everywhere and I can't find it, of course. So if you see it, please let me know.
So Pam, did it cite who did the research?
It could be an editorial from
Oh,
Forbes.
I see.
But even then, I think it's useful for people to look at it and say, hey, listen, we're seeing this. We're seeing the support for this kind of thing in the community. So, I mean, it's not a research paper. It is from Forbes Business. So,
Okay.
thank you if you find it.
Yeah, please share. We'll add it in the minutes. Does anybody else have anything to add? Any good of the order? It's a quiet crew today. Well, I just want to extend this offer to wish you all a happy holidays. And again, could not be more grateful for the support that we receive from this partnership, and just look forward to seeing how 2025 folds out for us. So with having said that, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 12:30 and we can stop the recording.